Hello, church family. Welcome to today's Sunday school lesson. We are in session 5 entitled Lack of Trust, and we are in Numbers chapter 20, verses 2 through 13. And our key idea this week is God calls his people to trust in him in every situation. And before we ask our first question, we want to talk about the fact that people generally fall into two categories. The first category being those who read the instructions all the way through and try to understand the instructions before they begin a project, and then others who read the instructions but try to generally figure it out as they go along. Or maybe they read step 1 but don't read all the way to step 7, 8, 9, whenever. Those who fall into the latter category may do so because of a heightened sense of self-confidence, impatience, or a history of past successes. Sometimes, though, at the end of the project, those in the second category may be left with extra unused parts or an end product that doesn't quite look like it was supposed to. So, which of these two categories do you fall under? Do you fall under number 1, where you read the instructions and follow the instructions all the way through, or do you fall into number 2, where you try to figure it out as you go along? For me, I tend to err on the side of number 2. I do read the instructions, but especially if it's a recipe or something where I generally know how things work and how things go together, I will do it by feel. And that has led me into many times very deep water where I have hooked myself into a corner or built myself into a corner because I didn't read an instruction clearly all the way through and did what I thought needed to be done instead of what actually needed to be done. In cooking, I have often gotten so caught up in cooking the entree that I have forgotten to cook sides. And so I get done with the chicken, the meat, whatever it is, and I have forgotten to cook the potatoes or the vegetable or whatever is going with it. And Grace will look at me and go, "No veggies tonight?" And I'll go, "No veggies tonight," because I forgot and I don't want to spend another 20 minutes cooking veggies when the meat is going to get cold. And so that's typically what happens, is that I leave something behind on the path of getting another project done. So if we go back and we look at the number of times that God's people have complained, we can see that they will complain in the book of Numbers about 7 times. There are 7 rebellions in the book of Numbers. The first is in chapter 11, verses 1 through 3, when they begin complaining about hardships. Later on in Numbers, they complain about the daily manna. Number 3, Miriam and Aaron complain about Moses' wife, and God struck Miriam with a skin affliction because of it. Numbers 13, number 4, it talks about the 12 spies going into Canaan, and this is what we read about Caleb and the spies. And God caused them to wander in the wilderness 1 year for each day the spies were in Canaan. In Numbers 16, this is the 5th rebellion. Korah staged a rebellion against Moses, and God was ready to destroy the Israelites yet again, but God interceded, and the earth opened and swallowed Korah and his ringleaders. So because of his rebellion, that he was killed, and so were those who followed him. Numbers 20, which is our passage today, tells of when the people were rebelling against God because of a lack of water, and Moses rebelled because of a lack of trust in the Lord. And that's what we're going to be looking today. And then finally, Numbers 21 says the people complained again about food and water, and so God sent serpents into the camp, and the serpents bit the people, who then died. Moses prayed, and God told him to raise up a bronze snake on a pole, and all who looked upon it recovered. So there are all of these rebellions, and God punishes rebellion. Today, we're going to be looking at chapter 20, verses 2 through 13, and see where Moses, the people had a failure of trust in the Lord, and Moses had a failure of heart, where he just finally was so enraged that he disobeyed the Lord's command, and because of that suffers very dire consequences, and we're going to look at that today. So, starting there in verse 2. There was no water for the community, so they assembled against Moses and Aaron. The people quarreled with Moses and said, "If only we had perished when our brothers had perished before the Lord. Why have you brought the Lord's assembly into this wilderness for us and our livestock to die here? Why have you led us up from Egypt to bring us to this evil place? It's not a place of grain, figs, vines, and pomegranates, and there is no water to drink." Then Moses and Aaron went from the presence of the assembly to the doorway of the tent of meeting. They fell face down, and the glory of the Lord appeared to them. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, "Take the staff and assemble the community. You and your brother Aaron are to speak to the rock while they watch, and it will yield its water. You will bring out the water for them from the rock and provide drink for the community and their livestock." So Moses took the staff from the Lord's presence, just as he had commanded him. Moses and Aaron summoned the people in front of the rock, and Moses said to them, "Listen, you rebels, must we bring rock out of this water for you? Or must we bring water out of this rock for you?" Then Moses raised his hand and struck the rock twice with his staff, so that abundant water gushed out, and the community and their livestock drank. But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Because you did not trust me to demonstrate my holiness in the sight of the Israelites, you will not bring this assembly into the land that I have given them. These are the waters of Meribah, where the Israelites quarreled with the Lord, and he demonstrated his holiness to them." The name Meribah means strife or contention, and ironically, this took place in Kadesh, which that word means holy. So, beginning in our first section, which is the problem. The problem is that there's no water. Let's read verses 2 through 5. There was no water for the community, so they assembled against Moses and Aaron. The people quarreled or contended or argued or fought with Moses and said, if only we had perished when our brothers had perished before the Lord. This is referring to when God wiped out those rebels in chapter 16, when Korah rose up against him. This is what they're referring to. If only we had died too. That way we wouldn't be dealing with suffering from a lack of thirst right now. Why have you brought the Lord's assembly into this wilderness for us and our livestock to die here? Why have you led us up from Egypt to this evil place? It's not a place of grain, figs, and vines, pomegranates, and there is no water to drink. They call it an evil place because they forgot that they were wandering in the desert, in the wilderness, because of their own sin. They had forgotten that this is their own doing. They call it an evil place, but it's a place of their own making. So why do we tend, and this is referring to verse 3 here, why do we tend to romanticize the good old days, even though they weren't always so good? We look at the past with what I like to call rose-tinted glasses, so that when we look back on red flags, they just look like flags. They don't look like red flags. And so we look back and we go, oh man, the past was great. There was no suffering. There was no strife because, well, obviously we made it here, and it's easier to remember the good times that got us here. Well, that's what the Israelites were doing. If only we had perished when our brothers had perished, when those rebels had perished, because at least back then we had water and we had food. Now we don't have water, nor do we have food. And so they are reminiscing and romanticizing what had taken place beforehand. They even go so far to romanticize what had happened long before then, when they were still enslaved in Egypt. They look at the ground and they go, there is no place, or this is not a place of grain, figs, vines, and pomegranates. Where are all the nice things we had when we lived next to the Nile River, where the produce was plentiful and there was plenty of food and water to drink? They were reminiscing and romanticizing on the past. So then God gives Moses a plan, verses 6 through 8. Then Moses and Aaron went from the presence of the assembly to the doorway of the tent of meeting, or the tabernacle. This was that portable tent of worship for the people of Israel while they were in the wilderness. Moses and Aaron fell face down, and the glory of the Lord appeared to them. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, "Take the staff and assemble the community. You and your brother Aaron are to speak to the rock while they watch, and it will yield its water. You will bring out water for them from the rock and provide drink for the community and their livestock." So, what kind of difficulties get you face down, either figuratively or literally, before the Lord? What is it that you go through that causes you to fall face down, to surrender to the Lord, to get you? What happens to get you to that point of prostration where you are bowing before the Lord, pleading with Him to fix whatever situation? For me, in the past year, it has all been about my car. And then out of thankfulness to the Lord, I have bowed and prayed, thank you for giving us this baby, for causing Grace's womb to be opened and letting us have this child. And thankfulness for God coming through and providing a way for my car to be repaired financially for Grace and I, so that we would not have to take on that financial burden. But this is referring specifically to difficulties. What difficulties have you faced that have caused this kind of reaction? Has it been a lack of food, or a lack of trust, or a lack of money? What has it been? Ponder and think on that. And then finally, the result of all of this, verses 9 through 13. So Moses took the staff from the Lord's presence just as he commanded him. Moses and Aaron summoned the assembly in front of the rock, and Moses said to them, "Listen, you rebels, must we bring water out of this rock for you?" Then Moses raised his hand and struck the rock twice with the staff, so that abundant water gushed out, and the community and their livestock drank. So first, there in verse 10, Moses says, must we bring water? Must we do this? He spoke to the people, though, instead of speaking to the rock as God had commanded. In doing so, he seemed, and it looks here that he is taking credit for what God is doing. And then there in verse 11, he struck the rock instead of speaking to the rock, and then the water gushed out. Moses sinned by disobeying the Lord, and instead of speaking to the rock, striking the rock, demonstrating his lack of trust in the Lord to do what he says through the way that he told Moses to do it. But God had mercy on the people and let them drink from the rock still, even though he struck it instead of spoke to it. I think it's important that we also look at the fact that this is what Moses had been able to do in the past. Moses had never spoken to the rocks before to draw forth water. He had tapped them with the staff. Here, though, God gave him very specific instructions to speak to it, to do something different than he had done before. And Moses was disobedient, relying on what had happened in the past, instead of trusting that the Lord would accomplish his goal through a new and different way here in Numbers 20. So, because of this, the Lord says to Moses and Aaron, because you did not trust me to demonstrate my holiness in the sight of the Israelites, you will not bring this assembly into the land I have given them. You will have to stay outside of the land of Canaan because of this disobedience. Moses would never get to go into the promised land because of this. And then it's noted that these are the waters of Meribah, where the Israelites quarreled with the Lord, and he demonstrated his holiness to them. So what does it say about God's character that he provided such an abundance of water? That even in the midst of Moses' disobedience, he did not punish the people for Moses' disobedience. He brought forth water so that they could drink, because he promised to take them back to the land of Canaan at the end of those 40 years. So what do we communicate to God when we follow his instructions, when we're obedient? We communicate that, God, we trust you. We trust you to get us through this. We trust you to make this happen. We trust you to take care of us while we are obedient to you. So then when we what do we communicate to him when we don't follow his instructions? We communicate the exact opposite, that we think we can do this on our own, and it demonstrates a lack of trust in the Lord to get us through what he has said he will follow us through, and what he will follow through in us. So remember this week to be obedient to the Lord, because there's probably a reason he's called you to be obedient. There's something that you have to be obedient to and for the Lord, and he wants you to be obedient and wants you to trust him to get you through whatever that obstacle is. Thank you so much for being with me. I look forward to worshiping with you very soon.